Happy Valentine's Day to all those who celebrate, and I hope you have a great day. I hope you and your spouse or your loved one, your girlfriend, your fiance, enjoy Valentine's Day in 2025. This is a Minnesota Vikings podcast by Minnesota Timothy. Thank you for joining the show and for making this podcast a part of your day. Hit that subscribe button wherever you are watching and follow button wherever you are listening. This podcast is 100% honest 100% of the time, regardless of how you or I feel. Okay, so a story I wanted to talk about today. The Minnesota Vikings rebuild plan. The Philadelphia Eagles just won the Super Bowl, as we all know. And Jordan Schultz, a Fox Sports NFL insider, shared a fascinating graphic from Fox on where the Philadelphia Eagles players and the Kansas City Chiefs players came from. Take a look at this. I'll share it on my screen and I'll describe it best for my listening audience. So it goes down the line of the offensive starters for the Chiefs and the Eagles. And it shares whether or not they were drafted or whether or not they were signed via free agency. Jalen Hurts drafted, Saquon Barkley free agency, A.J. Brown trade, Devontae Smith drafted, Jahan Dotson free agency or trade, Dallas Goedert draft, Jordan Mailata draft, Landon Dickerson draft, Cam Jurgens draft, Mekhi Becton Jets, Lane Johnson draft. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Out of the 11 players that started for the Philadelphia Eagles offensively, 7 of their players were drafted. And 4 of them were from free agency or trade. Take a look at the Chiefs' 11 players. Mahomes drafted, Isaiah Pacheco drafted, DeAndre Hopkins trade, Xavier Worthy drafted, Hollywood Brown trade or free agency, Travis Kelce drafted, Joe Thuney Patriots drafted or trade, Mike Caliendo draft, Creed Humphrey draft, Trey Smith draft, Jawan Taylor from the Jaguars. So similar story. 7 of the 11 Chiefs offensive starters in the Super Bowl were drafted. Now, the problem that we have seen from the Minnesota Vikings is the players that are on the Minnesota Vikings, the top end guys. Jefferson was drafted, Jordan Addison was drafted, Sam Darnold free agency, Aaron Jones free agency, Christian Darrisaw was drafted, Garrett Bradbury was drafted, Dalton Reisner free agency, Blake Brandel, I don't know, Brian O'Neill, I don't know either. But the point being is this. In the last few drafts from Kwesi Adolfo's selections have not been hardly at all effective players on the Minnesota Vikings roster. 2024, while McCarthy was hurt, Dallas Turner limited reps defensively, hardly played, hardly had any impact on any game. Kyrie Jackson had the tragic passing, which there's nothing you can do about that. That was just terrible. Walter Rouse never played. Will Reichard, sensational Will the Thrill at the beginning of the year, tapered off at the end of the year, maybe due to an injury he sustained. Michael Jurgens didn't play. Levi Drake Rodriguez didn't play. So the impact from the 2024 draft class was very limited. Some of it controllable, and some of it not with a J.J. McCarthy injury. But going forward, there is still hope that the 2024 draft class can make an impact. All right, 2023, Jordan Addison. Okay, that was a hit. Mekhi Blackmon, we're unsure, but has not had much impact yet. got injured going into his second season, so it's hard. The questions are still need to be answered about him. We're not sure on him. Jay Ward, no impact. Jaquan Warroy, no impact. Jaron Hall, not on the Vikings. Dwayne McBride, hardly any impact. 2022 first overall pick, first round. Lewis Seen, the number 32 overall pick. Andrew Booth, Ed Ingram, Brian Asamoah, Akalib Evans, Ezezi Atamawa, Ty Chandler, Badarian Lowe, Jalen Naylor, Nick Muse. Those are Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's drafts. And the impact players in 3 years on the Minnesota Vikings has been very limited, and that's being nice. The problem the Minnesota Vikings have right now is that they're trying to fill all their gaps via free agency. And that's going to have to change. It needs to first change with J.J. McCarthy because he is trending towards being the QB1 to start the 2024-2025 season. And if the Minnesota Vikings want to be taken seriously as Super Bowl contenders, they need to start drafting well so that they can plug those players into starting lineups. And then you can sign guys in free agency to big dollars. And then you can re-sign your Justin Jeffersons and Jordan Addisons and J.J. McCarthy's without having to worry about who you're going to let walk in free agency. The drafts these last 3 years for the Minnesota Vikings have been embarrassing. In 2022, only Ty Chandler, Jalen Naylor have made any serious impact on the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm being nice. Ty Chandler, for the most part, has been a third-string running back. And Jalen Naylor has been hurt besides this past season. And he stepped in well. Wide receiver 3, made some nice catches, had some big moments. But we're not talking about consistently making an impact on the game. You can find other Jalen Naylors out there. 2023, out of the 6 players drafted, only Jordan Addison has made any impact. 2024, out of the 7 players drafted, McCarthy's hurt. Okay, you get a pass on that one. Dallas Turner, really no impact. Will Reichard had an impact early on. Only 1 player out of 7 had any impact on this past season for the Minnesota Vikings. So the past 3 years, we're looking at a total of 4 players having any sort of impact on the Minnesota Vikings field, on their roster. That's how embarrassingly bad the Minnesota Vikings drafts have been recently. 2021, before Kwesi stepped in. This must have been Rick Spielman's last year. Christian Darrisaw, first round. Cam Bynum, 4th round. There's 2 impact players. Patrick Jones, 3rd round. He's an impact player. Kellen Mond. 2020, Justin Jefferson, 1st round. Ezra Cleveland, 2nd round. He was an impact guy while he was here. Cam Dancer, no. James Lynch, sort of, but not really. KJ Osborne, yeah, he had some moments. Blake Brandel, Josh Metellus. Rick Spielman had Rick Spielman right now in the Minnesota Vikings roster has more impact than Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has had in his 3 years as the Minnesota Vikings general manager. And maybe that's why he has not received his contract extension yet. Sure, he's hit on Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Greenard, Blake Cashman, but free agents aren't meant to solidify your entire roster. They're meant to fill in the gaps. You've got to find stars in the draft that can hit, and then you can have them on rookie contracts for 4 to 5 years. And then you bring in a Van Ginkel, a Jonathan Green, or a Blake Gashman to fill in the gaps. But you need to have impact players that you draft. Rick Spielman's 2020 draft and 2021 draft has been much more impactful than anything Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has done in the draft for the last 3 years. And Rick Spielman made his fair share of mistakes. I don't think anyone was disappointed when the Minnesota Vikings decided to move on from him. He made some big mistakes. Irv Smith Jr. never panned out. Kellen Mond never panned out. Jeff Gladney never panned out. There's some top guys that didn't work for Rick Spielman. And he had this ongoing beef with Mike Zimmer. Apparently they never talked in the locker room. But if we're comparing apples to apples, Rick Spielman to Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, Rick Spielman still has more impact on today's Minnesota Vikings roster than Kwesi does. So that's saying something. And that needs to change if you're Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell. Because you need to start finding your own guys and putting those guys into the starting rotation. Because soon, you're not going to be able to afford all the guys that you want to pay for if you can't put guys on rookie contracts and let them play on your roster for 4 to 5 years. The Kansas City Chiefs didn't want to pay Tyreek Hill, so they traded him. Well, they found other guys to replace him. Xavier Worthy, they traded for DeAndre Hopkins, and they made it work. So the Minnesota Vikings, when that day comes to pay Addison, which maybe they will or will not do, to pay McCarthy, they need to put together rookie contracts that can play, or you're going to run into a problem and you're going to be fired tomorrow. Breakfast Ball, show on FS1. They do a good job. And Craig Carton, I thought, did a tremendous job with this graphic. I'm going to share it with you here. It says this. It shows the Eagles players that they've paid. Eagles and Bengals players with $50 million contracts. The Eagles pay Jalen Hurts $255 million, Antonio Brown $96 million, Landon Dickerson $84 million, Lane Johnson $80 million, Devontae Smith $75 million, Jay Malata $66 million, and Dallas Goedert $57 million. The Eagles pay a bunch of these guys, and these are all mostly offensive players. So the highlight of the Super Bowl, the Eagles were up 34-0, but what is their defensive impact? Cooper DeJean, pick 6 touchdown. He's on a rookie deal. Jalen Carter, rookie deal. Some of their most impactful defensive players are on rookie deals. And the way that the reason why they're so stacked right now is because they pay their top guys, and their guys that are becoming stars are on rookie contracts. They might not be able to afford them in 3 to 4 years when they want big contract extensions, but right now they can. And in 3 to 4 years, they'll have to draft again to replace those guys. And Pete Bursich, the Minnesota Vikings radio color commentator, shared a tweet the other day. He said, since 2020, Eagles general manager Howie Roseman has drafted 27 players. 24 remain on the team. That's half the roster. That's half the roster. When you look at the Minnesota Vikings drafts, how many of them remain on the team these last few years? Hardly any of them. And if they are on the team, they're second and third stringers that don't play a single down of the football game. So the Minnesota Vikings need to draft better, plain and simple, if they want to be taken seriously as a Super Bowl contender. And that needs to start this year. So that's my take for the day. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making this podcast a part of your day. Hit that subscribe button and follow button wherever you're watching or listening.